Mikhail Gorbachev came to power at a time when the USSR was seen as the evil empire, locked in a nuclear arms race with the United States. Under his leadership, the Cold War would finally come to an end, but the Soviet Union would collapse.
He stopped a Cold War. He stopped confrontation between East and West. Millions, hundreds of millions of people in the world must say thank you, Mr. Gorbachev, for freedom, for independence, for new policy, for democracy, for liberal political systems.
After the death of Konstantin Chernenko, Gorbachev was seen as a new kind of Soviet leader. Relatively young and a man who was able to engage easily with the people. Charm them in a way his aged predecessors had not. A man Western leaders could do business with. But Gorbachev inherited a superpower with a failing economy. Long queues outside empty shops punctuated daily life. Gorbachev knew the Soviet Union could no longer afford the Cold War. In the White House, he found a president equally interested in reducing nuclear weapons. Their signature agreement to ban short and medium-range ballistic missiles, halting the nuclear arms race.
The importance of this treaty transcends numbers. We have listened to the wisdom in an old Russian maxim, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. Mr. General Secretary, though my pronunciation may give you difficulty, the maxim is, doверяй, no проверяй, trust but verify.
На каждой встрече вы это повторяете.
Хорошо, отлично, вот так и держать.
The lowest point of his leadership was the Chernobyl nuclear disaster.
Авария на Чернобыльской атомной электростанции.
It took Gorbachev 3 weeks to speak publicly about what had happened.
Взволновала международную общественность.
But he was determined that the failings Chernobyl uncovered would only accelerate the pace of his reforms.
Каждый на своем месте должен
He introduced glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring.
А что такое перестройка? Что такое перестройка? Свое дело делать честно. Главная перестройка.
Rock bands, previously underground, were performing on stage. Victor Tsoi's Peremen summed up the mood of the time. Our hearts demand change, the chorus said. Gorbachev withdrew the troops from Afghanistan. As the Berlin Wall came down, he refused to intervene, even as the communist regimes of Eastern Europe collapsed. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize the following year. But not everyone was celebrating.
On one hand, that was the end of the Cold War, a symbol of the end of the Cold War. On the other hand, we realized that what will go after that will be very, very difficult and dangerous.
In August 1991, tanks rolled into Red Square as conservative hardliners attempted a coup d'etat.
Предложила мне издать указ о возложении обязанностей президента на вице-президента,
Gorbachev was kept under house arrest in Crimea.
что мною было отвергнуто.
But this time the people pushed back. Boris Yeltsin rallied the crowds outside the White House. Unarmed civilians faced down tanks. 6 years under Gorbachev had given them courage and something worth fighting for.
He gave us this feeling of safety and this feeling of freedom and this feeling of freedom of speech. 6 years of freedom. And suddenly some very strange guys, Yenayev and KGB, said us, oh no, now it's again a totalitarian regime. No, people said, no, we don't want more. And people came to the streets.
After 3 days, the coup collapsed and Gorbachev returned with his family to Moscow. But the balance of power had shifted away from him, and he was losing ground politically. In November, Yeltsin banned the Communist Party from Russia. On Christmas Day 1991, Gorbachev had no choice but to resign.
Я прекращаю свою деятельность на посту президента СССР.
His final order was the lowering of the red flag over the Kremlin. The Soviet Union was no more. Many felt let down.
As a diplomat especially, who called to protect and project the interest of the country. It is much more easier to protect and project the interests of a superpower than in comparison with what has left of the superpower.
Through it all by his side was Raisa, the love of his life and his closest counsel. The couple met at university in Moscow. They were married for 46 years. When she died from leukemia in 1999, he was inconsolable. When she died, my life was taken away from me, he said later.
For me and for my mother as well, he was an example, you know, of a perfect husband, of a perfect man for every woman. And since I was a little kid, I saw how their relationships with my grandmother and how he loved her and so on. And it was very difficult to find somebody else like this.
He remained critical of his successors in the Kremlin, and especially of Vladimir Putin, a man whose long decades in power saw the freedoms which Gorbachev had won for his people crushed. Celebrated abroad, his legacy at home was conflicted, many blaming him for the chaos which followed the Soviet Union's collapse. But he was admired too, for allowing for the promise of democracy and freedom, even if it remains unfulfilled.
Do you recognize President Reagan?
Living into his 90s and through the global pandemic, Mikhail Gorbachev would quote the phrase his father had told him on his return from World War II. "We fought until we ran out of fight," he said. "That's how you must live." Diana Magnay, Sky News, Moscow.